One question that comes up is I often get is what's a appropriate amount of insurance? Usually, a rule of thumb is we talk about 8 to 12 times salary. The biggest thing you're trying to replace when it comes to insurance is the income side, because if you're making $100,000 and you're making that over a 20-year period, that is a lot of money. So it can be very easy to think about the fact that if you need to replace income for 20 years, that it could realistically be 8 to 12 times salary. Because a lot of times I see folks, maybe they're making 100,000, but they only have 200,000 of life insurance, and they're really, really underinsured. So, one of the questions I get along those lines is, what should I buy? Should I buy term insurance or permanent insurance? Anthony, how do you work with clients when you're evaluating, that situation, and, what kind of main factors you take into account in helping them to, figure out which route they should go?
I think the big factor you have to look at is, it's not one size fits all, obviously. And I think the paradigm for the longest period of time was just that. If you were 45 and had multiple kids, you did 8 to 12 times your income, buy a term policy. And it was just, you're rubber stamping it. And I think at that point, then over, 50 was saying, okay, buy a permanent policy for X amount that have basically have burial insurance and maybe take care of the spouse. And I think that paradigm has shifted. I think as you start to see that there are other riders you can put on policies like long-term health care, or as Ben was saying, you can also use these things as investment vehicles as well. I think the most important thing is you first have to educate a person on what they're buying, and what other advantages this policy might potentially have, what the cash value could potentially do for them down the road. I think we're so indoctrinated with the idea that term this age, permanent this age. I think once you start explaining to clients what inherently these products can do and what they're capable of doing, and then as they can transition down the road, is they're saying, okay, at this point, I've built up X amount of cash value. Okay, well, my insurance needs are greater now. I can tax-free roll this cash value over, get considerably more insurance, put riders on these policies, and maybe that my insurance needs are for something else at that point. So I think it's by a case-by-case basis, but I'm seeing a larger shift towards permanent policies. By far, because I think people are starting to educate themselves on what the benefits of permanent policies are and the riders that you can put on them. I think once they start seeing that, less than, historically speaking, 2% of term policies ever get used because people either outlive them, they drop them, or they convert them, and they realize how bad of an investment that is. But they're just looking at it going, well, it's such an inexpensive price for what I'm potentially getting. Well, there's a reason for that. So I think once you start educating your clients on what the possibilities of these policies are, it changes their mindset from going from term to permanent, and then the size of the policy they actually apply.
Hey, Carl, you mind if I weigh in on that a little bit as well?
Yeah, please do.
So, and I'm right in the same wheelhouse with Anthony. We work on the same kinds of things all day long. Most of the portfolios I see being developed now are blended, right? So we have term insurance, we've got permanent insurance, and maybe some with some different riders that we discussed. But the way I like to educate clients on it is that our life insurance need is like a meter. When we first start out, the need for life insurance on ourselves it's not there. But then we get together with somebody, we have a significant other, and then we have household expenses, joint expenses. We've got college, mortgage, second home, 2 cars. You're starting to spike up here. Then the kids start to leave, the mortgage gets paid off, and then you stall. You stall with all the things that we talked about before. Retirement now becomes your biggest concern. Can I make my retirement last? Will long-term care wipe me out? So with that meter, we like to fill this area with, a portfolio of term insurance. It's cheap. It gets me a large amount for that, $2 million example of Carl's. And then, later to walk away with something that I, quantifiably that I could have in my pocket as an asset class. So that's why we see a combination.
And I think Ben just hit on something really important. Whenever I come across most folks, when they think about term insurance, it's they're being sold either a 10, 15, 20, or 30-year policy. You do not have to just buy one. It is really illogical to me to only have one. It makes a lot more sense to blend these different contracts. So when you're in your 20s or 30s and you maybe just got married, you have a kid, you have the biggest insurance need at that point. So it may make sense to buy a 10 or 15-year term policy for a really low price and buy a lot of it. it's better to be overinsured during that period of time. And then maybe you have a small policy that's going to go 20 years or 30 years, which will take you through retirement. Then, as Ben mentioned, and then there may be a side piece that's a little bit smaller that's for legacy planning purposes, that, hey, I want to leave assets on a tax-free basis. Most of the time when we're analyzing contracts, I like to look at in insurance as an investment. And if you look at the after-tax rate of return, typically if you're passing away around life expectancy, late 80s, early 90s, I mean, right now, I mean, the actual investment return per se would be, anywhere from a 6 to 9% if you live to life expectancy, depending on the company. So if you're looking at it from a, investment standpoint and legacy, it actually is a, very strong asset class. Now, obviously, if you live longer, then that's actually a great thing too, because your other assets will continue to grow. So, and obviously, if something happens in the short term, you at least have that protection. So the insurance products out there, I think now give folks an opportunity to really make sure they have the protection. I understand that there's a lot of confusion on how they work. But the good thing is there's a lot of different groups out there that you guys can really go to get some information. I think we also hit on the long-term care subject. I think for folks, the way I look at that, if you start getting into your early 50s, it's certainly something that you may want to review, whether it's on a standalone basis or with a life or long-term care. Another type of insurance everyone should have, most of you guys have through your employer, would be disability insurance, long-term disability. If you don't, certainly something worth reviewing. But the idea here is you really want to knock out the three pillars: life insurance, the disability, and long-term care. If you have those three protections in place, it allows you to really transition to the wealth accumulation side and not have to worry about the what if, which ultimately will allow you to grow more long-term assets.